Thank you for joining us today. We're at St. Matthew's Chapel in Sugar Hill, New Hampshire. This church is elegantly located in the White Mountains. Many of you have probably seen this church already, driven by it on Route 117, maybe even taken a photograph, but you haven't been inside. So today we're in for a treat. Betsy Holcombe, who is a long-time parishioner and also an active member on the St. Matthew Committee, will give us both a history and a tour of St. Matthew's Chapel. Betsy, thank you for joining us today.
I'm always happy to talk about the history of St. Matthew's Chapel.
Can you tell us a little bit about the history of St. Matthew's?
Yes. The cornerstone of St. Matthew's was laid in 1893. It was meant to be a place for Episcopalians to have services, especially those who were in the grand hotels in the area. And originally it was painted red in the old photographs. It's now white, obviously. And it has been a part of the Sugar Hill community and North Country community for all of these years, and it has hosted services and weddings and memorials and baptisms and concerts. It's been a very important part of life here in North Country.
That's a wonderful history. And for this history to continue, this elegant chapel needs care. Now, if I'm correct, about 2 years ago it was diagnosed that this chapel was rolling off its foundation and going down the hill to Franconia. And Betsy was instrumental in both the planning and the fundraising of this project. Betsy, do you just want to tell us a little bit about the process that you went through?
Sure. As I was stepping into the chapel one morning with a friend, the friend looked down and said, "There's a gap between the top of the steps and the chapel," meaning that the building was not stable at that point. And she said, "Can you do something about it?" So I first contacted the New Hampshire Preservation Alliance, who gave us a grant to get a building assessment. We got the building assessment and discovered that, in fact, the foundation was not in good shape at all. In more than 127 years, the building had been pitching with the cold weather in North Country because the foundation was never put under the frost line. So we had the knowledge with what needed to be done, and we interviewed several people who said that they could raise the church and make a foundation. And we chose Arnold Grayton, who is a wonderful man who's considered the greatest living bridge wright in the country, meaning he works on covered bridges mostly, but he also moves buildings. And he was in his mid-80s and he had a lot of experience. And he went under the chapel and said, "This is a piece of cake." So he said, I'm going to pick it up and move it to the side and dig out everything that needs doing and put it back on its proper foundation. And he did it. People said, "Oh, you need to take the windows out to preserve them," but he managed to move this building 30 feet to the side without even a crack. And the windows are fine, everything's fine. When he put the chapel back, he lowered it a foot so that we could have two beautiful granite steps in place of the steep and shallow cement steps we had at the chapel. And it continues to be able to be used. We were so impressed by Arnold Grayton and his wife Meg and his team that we nominated him for a Lifetime Achievement Award with the New Hampshire Preservation Alliance, and he won that. It's a very rare award given. Meanwhile, in gathering all the grants, we went to LCHIP, the Land and Community Investment Program, And we received a grant from LCHIP, which is a long but meaningful process. You need to go to a conference first to find out how to fill out the application and what it means. Then you fill out an intent to apply for a grant, and then a huge volume of pictures and covering every aspect of the chapel was written up, and we did receive the grant, and that really helped us. In addition to LCHIP and the original grant from the Preservation Alliance, we also had some foundations, anonymous foundations, and private donations, and everything went into the restoration and preservation of this chapel.
So it's really quite a process then to go through this. And Betsy, maybe before we begin our tour inside, you can give some words of wisdom for other people who are trying to get funding for historic preservation projects.
It's so important to be able to preserve the old buildings here in New Hampshire, but everywhere. And although it seems like an arduous task, it really is worth being able to not only get the funding from the grants, but to involve other agencies in the process and have them express an interest. And we were in newsletters and newspapers, and it was really a community effort from beginning to end.
Well, now we're ready to begin the tour.
This church was designed by a very famous architect named Frederick Clark Withers. He had written a book in the 1870s called Church Architecture. He was from New York, and he was brought up here by somebody who knew him. And he designed one of the most beautiful chapels in New Hampshire. It happens to be one of the most photographed in New Hampshire because the proportions are just so beautiful. Its style is Gothic Revival, and it has many different kinds of shingles on it, and it just makes it just so beautiful. The outside is lovely, but I'd like for you to come in to see the inside as well.
Thank you, Betsy.
Please come in. As we talked about in the laying of the cornerstone, we have a photograph from 1893, and the women are sitting on the bench, the men are doing the work, and there's a little dog running across. And it's just a beautiful photograph of the very beginning of the chapel. So I'd like you to see the inside. This is the only chapel that Frederick Clark Withers designed that's completely made out of wood. All of his other ones were stone and brick, and this is just the most beautiful wood. It's all original from 1893, and it looks like the underside of a ship, and it's just magnificent. We have some particularly beautiful windows that were brought by my grandmother from a chapel that was being deconsecrated in Merrick, Long Island. And this window is dedicated to her mother. And we had it cleaned a few years ago because it was beginning to darken a little bit. But it is just a very lovely tribute to my grandmother's mother. Also, on the other side, we have a window dedicated to my grandmother's father from the same chapel. And again, we had this one cleaned. The flowers are getting a little dingy, and the cleaning of it just brought out the beauty of the flowers and of the stained glass. The glass is really pretty, and the windows mean a lot to the chapel. People are surprised when they come in and see such beautiful windows here. So going down the aisle, you'll notice that there are plaques dedicated to people, and this one is the one dedicated to the architect, Frederick Clark Withers, and that has been there for a long time. And we have other plaques honoring other families as well. The very prettiest window is a Tiffany window, and this also was brought from the same chapel by my grandmother, and it says, "I will lift mine eyes unto the hills from whence cometh my help." And I've had people come and see this for the first time and just have tears running down their faces because it's so beautiful. Philandra Reeves Jennings was the junior warden of the church in Long Island, not of the church here, but they kept the window intact. My father always said what this window is doing in Long Island, I have no idea, because it looks like New Hampshire. It has the blues and the greens and the pinks and the purples of Tiffany, and it is magnificent, of a river running down through the mountains, and it's lovely. And we have 10 services a year, 10 Episcopal services, but we also have the weddings and other services too, weddings and memorials and concerts. Concerts sound beautifully in here. The acoustics are wonderful for music, and we have an organ, and sometimes we have harp players, and we've had the North Country Chamber players, and it's really a wonderful place to hear concerts. And people love coming here. The ministers who come basically return every year, and they always express great joy at being able to come and preach a service at St. Matthew's.
So this ends our tour. Betsy, again, thank you very much. Can you give us some parting words of what you think is most important about this chapel?
It means so much to us to preserve this chapel and to have it here for generations to come. Actually, when the chapel was lifted up and moved, we found a time capsule from 1893, and although they never knew whether we would ever find the time capsule, we have replaced the time capsule, and we don't know whether generations from now somebody will find the time capsule. We hope so. We want this to be here for many, many years. It's been more than 125 years, and we would love for it to continue to be a part of people's lives. Now that there's a solid foundation underneath, and it's not traveling anywhere. It's going to stay right where it is, in the heart of Sugar Hill, in North Country, New Hampshire.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.